Wuthering Heights by Ellis Bell. How far would you hate your loved ones? How strong is your love? How destroying is your love? Can hatred destroy love? This novel tells the story of love and passion that reaches the limit of position between the heroine of the story, Catherine, and Heathcliff, and how this feverous love brings them to their destruction and the destruction of others around them. Wuthering Heights is a novel by Emily Bronte, published in 1847 under her pseudonym Ellis Bell. This novel is the only finished novel by Bronte. She wrote it when she was 28 years old, but it didn't succeed when published at the age of 29. After the novel failure, she died at the age of 30. She never loved or married before death. After Emily's death, her sister Charlotte published a second edition in 1850. That time, critics paid lots of attention to the novel, and so did the readers, to make it one of the greatest novels of all times. The name of the novel is taken from a manor in the Yorkshire Meadows, a historic town in northern England. The word wuthering in Yorkshire means the changing weather. The story begins in Yorkshire lawns with Mr. Lockwood, a new resident of Thrushcross Grange, a large house which he rented from Mr. Heathcliff. That place was close to another place called the Wuthering Heights. On the first day, Mr. Lockwood spends his night at Heathcliff's house because of the storm. He meets Heathcliff's son-in-law and daughter of Catherine. In the chamber, he saw graffiti belongs to the former inhabitant of the room called Catherine. When he falls asleep, he has a nightmare. A ghost of Catherine holding his arm and begging him to let her in through the window. He cries out in fear, rousing Heathcliff, who rushes into the room. Lockwood is convinced that what he saw was real. Heathcliff, believing Lockwood to be right, examines the window and opens it. He was hoping to allow Catherine's spirit to enter. When nothing happens, Heathcliff shows Lockwood to his own bedroom and returns to keep watch at the window. At sunrise, Heathcliff escorts Lockwood back to Thrushcross Grange. After his visit to the Heights, Lockwood becomes ill. He stays in bed for some length of time. The Grange housekeeper, Ellen, who is looking after him, tells him the story of the family at the Heights during his recovery. Nellie says, "It is 30 years earlier, the owner of Wuthering Heights, Mr. Earnshaw. He lives there with his son Hindley and younger daughter Catherine, as well as with a young Nellie Dean, who is the same age of Hindley and is his servant and foster sister. On a trip to Liverpool, Earnshaw finds a homeless boy, described as a dark-skinned gypsy in aspect. He adopts the boy. The boy doesn't reveal his name, so Mr. Earnshaw gives him the name of Heathcliff. The whole family don't like the boy at all, but Catherine likes him with time passing, and they grow very close together. Hindley, the biggest enemy to Heathcliff, is sent to university. 3 years later, Earnshaw dies and Hindley becomes the landowner. He is now the master of the Wuthering Heights. He returns to live there with the new wife, Frances. He allows Heathcliff to stay, but only as a servant, and regularly mistreats and humiliates him. A few months later, after Hindley's return, Heathcliff and Catherine walk to Thrushcross Grange to spy on Edgar and his sister Isabella, who lived there. After being discovered, they try to run away, but they are caught. Catherine is injured by the Lintons' dog and taken into the house, while Heathcliff is sent home. Catherine stayed with the Lintons for several months and is influenced by their genteel manners. When she returns to Wuthering Heights, she looks more like a lady. She even laughed at Heathcliff's manners and appearance. The next day, the Lintons visit them. Heathcliff dressed up nicely to impress Catherine. During the visit, Heathcliff argued with Edgar, but Hindley looked Heathcliff in the attic. This drives Heathcliff very mad and willing to take revenge. The relationship between Heathcliff and Hindley was never stable. It was always full of humiliation and exchangeable despise. The following year, Frances Earnshaw, Hindley's wife, gives birth to a son. They named him Hareton, but she dies a few months later. Hindley descends into drunkenness. 2 more years pass, and Catherine and Edgar Linton have become friends, while she grows more distant from Heathcliff. Edgar proposes to Catherine and she accepts. Although her love for Edgar is not comparable to her love for Heathcliff, but she cannot marry Heathcliff because of his low social status and lack of education. So she decided to marry Edgar to ensure herself a high social status. When Heathcliff overhears that, he ran away without any trace. Catherine becomes ill as a result of Heathcliff's runaway, because she always possessed a special love for Heathcliff in her heart. 3 years pass. Edgar and Catherine marry and go to live together at Thrushcross Grange, where Catherine enjoys being the lady of the manor. 6 months later, Heathcliff returned, but now as a wealthy gentleman. Catherine is delighted, but Edgar is not. Edgar's sister, Isabella, soon falls in love with Heathcliff, who despises her, but he uses her as a means of revenge on Catherine. Edgar, despising Heathcliff, forbids him from visiting them again. Now Catherine is pregnant of Edgar's child. Heathcliff spends his time in the Heights in gambling with Hindley, who later sells everything he owes to Heathcliff to pay his debts. Heathcliff elopes with Isabella, but they return after 2 months because Heathcliff hears that Catherine is dying. With the help of Nellie, he visits Catherine secretly, and he changes the lock of Edgar's hair in her necklace with a lock of his own. Unhappy Isabella leaves Heathcliff because she knows Heathcliff still loves Catherine. She runs away and gives birth to a boy named Linton. 6 months after Catherine dies, her brother Hindley dies too. Thus, Heathcliff becomes the master of Wuthering Heights. 12 years pass. Cathy becomes a beautiful girl. When Edgar knows that his sister Isabella is dying, he travels to bring her son Linton to adopt. When Heathcliff hears that, he insists that Linton lives in Wuthering Heights. 3 years pass. Heathcliff took Casey to Wuthering Heights to introduce her to his son Linton. He wants to marry them, so his son could inherit the Thrushcross gang too. So he uses his son to take revenge of Edgar and Catherine at the same time. When Nellie and Cathy go to the Heights, Heathcliff captures them for 5 days to marry Cathy to Linton. After the marriage, Cathy flees to see Hindley, her dying father. Heathcliff, now Casey's father-in-law, insists that Cathy live in the Heights after her father's death. After some time, Linton dies and Heathcliff becomes the master of both Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Gang. At this moment, Nellie's tale comes to present time, and the girl Lockwood misunderstood as Heathcliff at the beginning is his daughter-in-law, Cathy. Time passes, and after being ill for some time, Mr. Lockwood, the tenant, becomes tired of the moors, and he informs Mr. Heathcliff that he will be leaving Thrushcross Gang. 8 months later, the meddlesome tenant Lockwood returns to the area by chance. He finds Nellie and asks her of what happened when he was away. Nellie says, Hareton, Hindley's boy, has had an accident and stays at the farmhouse. He and Cathy become close. While their friendship develops, Heathcliff begins to act strangely and has visions of Catherine. He stops eating and, after 4 days of increasingly bad health, is found dead. He was found dead in Catherine's old room. He is buried next to Catherine. The story ends when Mr. Lockwood learns that Hareton and Cathy plan to marry on New Year's Day. As he gets ready to leave, he passes the graves of Catherine, Edgar, and Heathcliff. He pauses there to contemplate the quietness of the moor. End.